Congratulations, everybody. It's very wonderful to sit still. So that was 30 minutes of meditation. I didn't add the extra 15. I thought I'd open it up for more questions, maybe a little more discussion. Anybody have a question to start with? If not, I have a few topics I could start in on. Oh, wonderful. Everybody's already enlightened. That's great. Our work's done here. Yeah. So my first teacher was Zen Master Ji. He was a Korean teacher that came to this country in the 60s. And one of his senior students at the time was a fellow named Bob Moore, whose official Buddhist name is Ji Bong Sansa, which is Zen Master Ji Bong. And he's the guy I've principally trained with for the last, I've trained with him technically for almost 30 years, but for the last 15 or 20, he's been my sole teacher. So, so I sort of come out of that lineage, and mostly that's what my job is. It isn't so much me personally, although I can't not be myself, but there's a fairly impersonal aspect to the teaching. And Zen meditation, and Zen in general, has a fair number of misconceptions that I run into over time, and has a fair number of misconceptions that I had about Zen meditation. So the biggest mistake that I made was that it's a much wider practice than a lot of people think. That it kind of includes many of these other points of view and these other approaches. And Zen Master Ji was particularly talented at pulling out of the Buddhist tradition whatever medicine was helpful in the moment. In the case of a person with a question or a person with a particular kind of suffering. So it didn't, to him there wasn't a big distinction technically between a Mahayana bit of wisdom or advice or a Theravadan bit of wisdom or advice or a Tibetan bit of wisdom or advice. He pulled freely from any of that, at least to as far as his experience and his knowledge was about that. We tend to say in our tradition that we have 5 forms of practicing, 5 methods of practicing. And they address different aspects of our temperament and different aspects of being a human being. So the first one is vow, V-O-W, vow, as in a great vow. That sets a direction. And in the case of Zen, the vow is to wake up to the nature of reality. It's often characterized or described as the vow is to save all beings from suffering. Well, that's metaphorical and also literal. And it is an incomprehensible vow. It's a vow that I don't understand. But I make that vow anyway, because that's the direction or the approach. And that vow, with a practitioner, it needs to be animated every day somehow. And it also includes the person making the vow. So the end of suffering is a two-way street. It's happening at all times. And the Buddha was very interested in the cause of suffering. Causality was a significant issue at the time and has been ever since. And all of us have a responsibility to look into the cause of our suffering. Not so much like it's my fault, but something a little more subtle and wide. Like, what exactly is the nature of this suffering I'm in? So this vow and this question or doubt and incomprehensibility of the vow, those things all kind of blend together. If a practitioner begins to think, oh, this vow is very specific, and I have to do something very specific in this particular case, that's a little bit thin ice, maybe not the best approach. The particulars always do matter, but the vow has to come out of this great intention and this great doubt. So at the same time we're cultivating or practicing this vow, we are also practicing or cultivating doubt. And then the vow is able to maintain its integrity and it stays spontaneous. If the vow becomes narrow, then it no longer can be spontaneous. So we might find ourselves in a situation that we would characterize as, oh, I'm suffering, and our wisdom can appear because we're being constricted by a preconceived idea. And we may find ourselves in a situation where others are suffering and we can't help because we're constricted by a preconceived idea of some sort. So in Zen, we don't attach to concepts. We use them as effectively as we can, but we try to hold them as loosely as possible to keep it from being restrictive. Any question at this point? Cause a question? Yeah.
How do you cultivate doubt? What is that?
I don't
Cultivating
know.
doubt.
I don't know. We cultivate doubt many ways. We keep the question is one of the kind of pat answers for that. Sung Sam would say, always lose. We say, what is this? And we try to keep that mind. It's a kind of curiosity, and it's not a mind on top of the mind we're using. You know, it isn't, in my work as a set decorator, I have to think about a lot of things as a set decorator on a TV set. I don't, on top of all that thinking, I don't put, what is this? However, there will be suffering in the course of a day of set decorating. And it might be suffering I generate, or it may be suffering someone else is generating. The very first, the threshold for getting out of that suffering is, what is this? And then it's very necessary to have that question right to the fore. Yes, I'm driving, the phone is on speaker, they have just told me something that is impossible to do. If I latch onto the story that this is impossible to do, I will no longer be able to do my job. So then I have to keep, what is this? I'm thinking it's impossible to do. But if I say that, I won't be able to do the job and it'll just get worse. So what can I do? Now I have a questioning state of mind. That's keeping great doubt. If I begin to be sure of my version, that's also a problem. That'll become an impediment. Thich Nhat Hanh, the teacher Thich Nhat Hanh, has a very good way of 4 steps of keeping this mindfulness of this question is, what is this? Am I sure? Then he says, hello, habit, energy. And the 4th, if I take this action, will it lead to loving kindness? So somehow or another, and it's different at all times, I'm trying to fold that in to the deck of cards that is my work day. What is this? Am I sure? hello habit energy, because I have many, many thousands of habits that are constantly compelling me. If I'm acting out of the habit energy, sometimes that's correct. Sometimes that's necessary because of the work at hand. But more often, we want to reside fully in the moment and then see the habit appear and then answer that last question. If I act this way, will it lead to loving kindness? And that loving kindness is not, I'm a doormat and they're happy, or I'm happy and they're a doormat. But it is a interpenetration, it's a interbeingness quality that's achieved. In the old days we would say we're finding a win-win, which is sort of a kind of positive Pollyanna view, but it's not bad in the workplace. And sometimes that gets people's attention. Oh, okay, that sounds good, I'll try and help. And then at least you have them listening, because everybody likes winning right out of the gate. Nobody wants to hear about losing. So you're tricking them in a way. But that is actually the case. If we can discover in that moment what is loving kindness, everything opens up and the greatest potential can be served. Moments before the problem, I don't know what the greatest potential is. I never know. That's great doubt. Then the problem appears. Then I make up a story. Why this problem is here, what's going to make it go away, and get out of my way so I can get it done. That's my habit. So am I sure? Probably not. Because I would much rather put in a habit than live in the unknown of that moment. Than live in my imagination, the unknowns of the players at hand, whether it's the head of the lighting department or the first AD's office or my assistant or my boss. There's this entire network of relationships, and they're all moving forward in this project, in this TV show. And I'm going to have various investments, loyalties, affections, dislikes, and those are all going to tie into my habits. So the Buddha's teaching on liberation is that we are liberated from all of that. It's possible to be liberated in a moment from all of that and act with loving kindness. And we don't know how that's done. Back to the four methods of practice, this vow is incomprehensible. And that requires a courage. It requires courage to not know, to live without certainty, and yet be confident. That's just a paradox, because you might discover yourself feeling quite confident, and it's coming out of uncertainty. If that's the case, you are in a kind of creative flow, and you are keeping a great question, in my view. If we look right at our suffering, it is often difficult to cope, and we get really confused. So in our practice, we also have a bowing practice. That's with the letter B. So we do a full prostration, a bow, and I'll demonstrate. It's a little different than just a hop chang, which is, so we have this bow, which is a hop chang, and then we have a full prostration. Now, to some degree, I did that incorrectly because of my age and frailties. But the bone is there. We always want to keep in mind a couple of things with a bow. We're touching our forehead to the floor, which is a metaphor and also literal, putting down my opinion, my condition, my idea. And then this lifting up of our hands is offering our true nature in service to the world, which is incomprehensible again, but that's the direction, that's the effort. So depending on a person's health and depending on their temperament and their particular body and many, many other things, a person may do 3 bows a day in their practice, in their formal practice. They might do 9 bows a day in their formal practice. They might do 108 bows a day in their formal practice. Zen Master Sung-Sang, when I first met him, was doing 3,000 bows a day in his formal practice, and he was in his 50s. So he was doing a lot of bowing and a lot of teaching and a lot of leadership, and that was his practice, his formal practice, along with seated meditation, Dharma talks. So it's all human minds have a kind of grasping, checking, and measuring habit. So we fall anywhere on the spectrum of, oh, I could never do that, I don't know what that guy is talking about. Or, oh, I'm just not very good if I only do 3 bows, or I only do 9 bows, a person who does 108. And all of that kind of checking and measuring. That's just a habit. It's empty of any self-nature, and you can promptly let it all go. If something resonates for a person in terms of a practicing form, then I always suggest try it as a practicing form. In Zen, the interesting thing about bowing is it's not the problem. So if I have a problem with a lot of anger appearing habitually, or a lot of sexual desire appearing habitually, or a lot of fear appearing habitually, if I go right to the problem, what am I afraid of? What is my desire so strong? Everything gets clouded and kind of confused. It's very hard to see it. But if I can step back to the whole, keep my mind on the whole. So, oh yeah, I'm overcome with anger at a family member, but I'm going to keep my whole family in mind. I'm going to keep my whole life in mind. I'm going to keep my whole community in mind. I'm going to keep my whole family, which is deceased and buried in the ground, that brought me to this point. So now, where's everybody's mind? Where's my anger? It may still be there, but now we're trying to act out of the whole. Well, bowing is a little bit like that. So I can be so angry, and the anger can be keeping me up day after day after day, or night after night. I can just do a bowing practice, and that anger will come down. There's a relationship, and I'm trying to make it correct, and I don't understand how. That's ignorance. That's human ignorance. We are ignorant of the nature of reality, and then we are ignorant of our ignorance. So the second one is very difficult, because I'll have an ignorance and then it's hidden from me. So this ignorance might be causing me suffering, it'll be causing my loved ones suffering. So any kind of, sometimes the loved ones know it's there before I do. So I can't see it though. So it doesn't matter if they're, yammering in my ear, you need to do blah, 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 blah. If I don't see it, I'm going to see that's not true. So I'm suffering. I'm not going to get to the solution. If I do some bowing practice, then that's my intention to take this away. That's walking the walk. I'm going to put down my opinion, my situation, my condition, even when I don't know what it is. So I'm ignorant, and then here's the other ignorance. So this ignorance is hiding this ignorance. And then the whole organism has just gone over to bow and put everything down, put everything down, put everything down. This will get weaker because of the bowing practice. It just takes the oomph out of it. And then eventually this becomes more transparent, a little porous, and we get some kind of a glimpse. Oh, I'm really stubborn. Or, wow, I really have this point of view and I didn't know I had it. And a few months ago, that person told me that's how I thought, and I argued with them. So then the whole thing becomes more translucent, more transparent. We say clear. Then once it's clear, we can do something about it, maybe not do something about it, though we don't know. But in Zen, we call that attaining our mind. So this first level of ignorance has finally disappeared, and then we see, oh, all my life, I have not trusted people, maybe. Maybe I don't trust people in a very deep way. Well, if I've hidden that from myself, then that distrust compels me all the time. So one of the functions of practice is to attain our own mind, and take these things that are obscured and just illuminate them. Not necessarily change them. That's a different order. To first illuminate. Because if we don't have an intimacy with everything in here, if we don't have an intimacy with it, our function is never clear. We actually can't function in our life. Or we function in a slightly askew way, which might be fine. In many cases, this isn't all black and white. It's actually quite subtle. But we can function more clearly if we can bring our awareness to bear on what we are. So these practicing forms of the vow sets our direction. Then the bow is walking the walk of just putting down our small consciousness and opening ourselves up to our true nature, which is not hidden. It's always right there. It actually can't be. It can't be destroyed. Then we have chanting in our tradition, and the reason the chanting is there, we talk about this don't know center, which is where the doubt resides, the question, and then we talk about heart, which is courage or intention, and then we talk about our cognition. The ability for every one of you in an incredibly sophisticated way is following my talk. You are not only following all of my points, you are referencing your own imagination and historical activity. It is remarkably complex. And it is a cognitive activity which is incredibly valuable and wonderful. It has made the planet what it is. In some cases that's wonderful, and in some cases that's horrible. But the great way is not difficult. It has no likes or dislikes. That doesn't mean we're not honest about when it's horrible and when it's wonderful, but we aren't controlled by that view. So this cognition that all of you possess is constantly going on, and it needs a clear button to return to the moment. And the doubt is the clear button, technically. So if we can keep this question, then we are hitting the clear button basically on this incredibly complex calculator. Now, everybody here seems like I can't quite see you guys, but you're all over 20 at least. 25, 30, and then a few begin to drop off, 45, 50, a few begin to drop off, 60, 65, a few more begin to drop off. So that's a long time running a computer and never hitting the clear button or rebooting. So this question, this doubt, is a reboot. And all of our history, our memories, all of our cognitive things, they continue to go, but we hit clear. And then they're brought to bear on a particular moment effectively. And there's a chance habit, energy, won't compel us into the situation. It won't compel us to act. Because once we act out of habit, then we get the habitual result, or a complex unfolding of that. So we have the great vow, we have the bowing in the tradition, we have the chanting. I digressed. So the chanting connects these three things. And it opens our heart. Because we will suffer and we will witness suffering, and that will break your heart. It will. Anybody who's done even the smallest amount of meditation is going to have their heart broken. You're going to see the suffering in the world. That's also what happened to the Buddha. So this broken heart has to heal, otherwise it can't function. And we're experiencing our compassion, but if we get lost in that compassion, we also cannot function. It has to be wisdom and compassion together. Wisdom and compassion. This is the Buddha's teaching. So no one can show us how to do that. We can only attain that ourselves. A teacher maybe can set an example, maybe set up some signposts, but we're the ones who have to walk the walk. Because each of us is unique in our suffering, each of us is unique in our capacity for compassion, and each of us is unique in the way that wisdom is going to manifest. So teachers can be a little bit of, I like to think of it as a park ranger. Here's the cliff, here's the briar patch, here's the great view of the canyon, here's the water, here are the plastic bags for your dog's poop, but you got to walk through the park. You know, you have to hike the canyon. You're not the park ranger. So this chanting, if people are comfortable with it, if they enjoy it, or even if they don't enjoy it, if they do it, they're doing it for all beings. They're doing it for this reason that's incomprehensible. So on a given day, say on Monday, I go to work, and I might be earning money for myself or my family. Or I might be making my producers happy. But at a certain point in the day, I set aside all that action, and I just do action for something that is incomprehensible to me, that I don't understand. I don't understand it. I just do it. And that opens me up. And I don't know what that means. And by being willing to not know, our life appears. And we actually get our whole life, not a filtered version of it, and not a reduced version of it, and not a constricted version of it, but a totally surprising and spontaneous version. That doesn't mean we're startled. That just means we don't expect it, and we have something to navigate skillfully. The last two parts of the training are meditation and cognitive training. So cognitive training is just what we're doing right now. Question and answer, somebody giving a talk, making points. Maybe it's reading a sutra, reading the Buddha's words, if we have the temperament for that. Maybe reading another teacher's words whom we've never met, but they've taught in text, and that somehow resonates for us. And then, of course, meditation. Meditation, in Zen, the fundamental approach to meditation is keeping the question. However, that's done with mindfulness. So mindfulness is an aspect or a necessary ingredient to living Zen meditation. There are pitfalls in all meditation forms, and in Zen the expression we use is it becomes dead. And meditation can become dead any number of ways. So all practitioners just want to be a little bit on guard. You know, they want to be a little bit questioning and trying. So it's a mind that aspires without a goal. There is aspiration, there is trying, but there isn't wanting. And making that distinction is very important. and never ending. It's never ending. We aspire, and it'll often turn into desire. And now it may be wholesome desire, or it may be unwholesome desire. Nobody knows that except us. And if we're distracted, or preoccupied, or compelled by a habit, or any other number of discursive activities, we're going to lose track that our aspiration has turned into unwholesome desire. On the other hand, once we have a habit of aspiration and a habit of just trying without a goal, just for all beings, this mystery we cannot understand, that habit becomes stronger and stronger. So then generally that is the given habit, and then only when some very strong karma is overwhelming us or compelling us do we lose sight, or does that disappear. So it comes out of not knowing because we've set up the habit. That's a little bit the Zen approach. Maybe a lot the Zen approach. So I've been making several points. Are there questions, or has it triggered a question or a complaint? Yeah.
The chanting. Do you have a little rote chant, or do you make up your own?
You are welcome to do whatever works.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I would say to anybody on the planet, find something that will cause that. There's physiological change in chanting. You will breathe in very quickly, and then you will breathe out very slowly. Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. So already you're setting up more breath out and a very short breath in, which is in Taoist traditions is a very specific breathing technique. You can chant Coca-Cola as well. This is I'm quoting Zen Master Sung Song here. He'd say, what you chant does not matter, only the intention. Is the chant a great vow? And is it putting down my I, my, me mind? And is it to wake up into this moment? If those are all the intentions, if the person sees that landscape correctly, then you just have to have confidence in the chant. So it can be Hail Mary, It can be the Apostles' Creed. It can be Shimyo Janggu De Dharani, which is the beginning of a Sanskrit chant. In our tradition, we chant, the first chant we chant every day is Chinese, because we're tipping our hat basically to the Chinese people that kept the tradition alive. If they hadn't, I wouldn't have learned it and been able to do it. And then we chant in Korean, which is tipping our hat to the Korean people. Oh, thanks you guys. You did this for 1,200 years and now I can do it. It's not that the chant is particularly important, but it's incredibly important that Korean people did it for 1,200 years. Otherwise, it wouldn't have shown up here. And that's all that means. It's nothing more than that either. And then we chant in English because we speak English, and now suddenly cognition is involved in the chant. When I first learned the Chinese, I had no idea of the translation. In fact, when I read the translation, I didn't like it at all. I stopped. It was too pompous and flowery, and it reminded me of the Catholic Church, and I come from that tradition, and I was very hostile towards it at the time. So I thought, oh, it's better if I don't know the translation of this Chinese. Now I like the translation of the Chinese, and it doesn't remind me of something else. So it's been 30 years. And then the last chant we do typically is Great Dharani, which is in Sanskrit. And that was not a language that was spoken, but this is a phonetic pronunciation of a written chant, and it's an energy chant. So for the Great Dharani, there is no translation, as I've been told. I don't know, I'm not a scholar, but I don't know any translation. So it's just sounds. Did that answer the question?
Yes, thank you
Okay,
very
sure.
much.
Yeah.
When you vow,
Yeah.
is there like a thought, or you're just doing it without?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's exactly like meditation in the sense that I try to keep a great question when I'm bowing, but usually I'm annoyed, I'm kind of sleepy, or my mind is racing about some problem I can't put down, something like that. And so then I just keep trying to return to what is this? And I try to practice mindfulness. I try to become completely aware of the body that's bowing. And in fact, that's something I'm often emphasizing, because a lot of people will take on a practice and just ignore their bodies, and that's a mistake. And it can be a very painful and harmful mistake. It's very unkind to the body. And I only have this body, and it's the only one I can practice with. Like I know this seems obvious, but I can't practice with your body. So if I have a lower back or dried up cartilage or arthritis or something, I'm practicing with that. So that's a great question. You know, what is this body? That's an aspect of bowing, is to become very mindful of the whole thing. So maybe 7 or 8 bows in, body's not working so well, then just a standing bow. Or standing completely still and imagining a bow. Now, is this rationalizing or copping out? It might be. But if it's coming out of a great question and mindfulness, it probably won't be. I'm the only one that's going to know. And I have to take responsibility for that and just do my best. I try to keep it real. I fail often. But a failure in formal practice is the curriculum for waking up. Because a failure inflames the ego. That creates a self. A failure creates a self. And that's an opportunity for us to see it. So making a mistake in general and in specifics and failing to do something correctly, that's a curriculum for waking up. So early on, Sung Sang would always say, make a mistake, no problem. Just make it correct. Make it correct. And when it comes to guilt, you want guilt to function like lightning. It illuminates everything very clearly, and then let it go. Take what the lightning taught you. Take what the guilt taught you, and then act on it out of loving kindness. That's loving kindness towards your mistake and loving kindness towards the other people that were involved. Guilt's incredibly valuable, and it's worthless. If it's held on to, it's almost always worthless. But to experience it intimately and have it illuminate the whole situation, it's incredibly valuable. Because it is sometimes, it's penetrating through these layers and layers of ignorance that we create over time. Sometimes we have very good reasons to create this ignorance. So all of this is done with no judgment. No judgment. And that's very difficult. But if you can manage it, wisdom and compassion just flow out of you, authentically and spontaneously. If you can trust it. If you can trust not judging. So another question? Or complaint? Editorial? Yes?
I'll ask you a question I ask most teachers. What were some of the turning points, major turning points in your practice?
The one, I referred to it slightly. I am a gay man, and I came out of the closet at the age of 27. I had been married for 10 years at that point, and I had 2 wonderful children. And the shit hit the fan, pardon my French. And it was horrible. And it was an angry, violent, horrible divorce. And my ex-wife was doing the best she could, but she was incredibly angry. And my children were 7 and 9, and they were just the victims to all that anger. And I didn't discover Zen until I was 33. So there's like 6 years in there where I was sort of practicing the religion of art. And I had Catholicism threw me out. Every friend, to the last one of them, just walked away. Of course, this was in 1979. And I had enough anger to choke 3 horses. And most of the time it wouldn't compel me, but a lot of times it did. And it certainly compelled me when I was talking to Sharon. And I knew that this wasn't good, and there was nothing I could do about it. It was just overwhelming. So I complained to Sung Sung. Once I started practicing in a public talk like this, I just raised my hand. I said, "Sir, I have this ex-wife. We have all this anger. And I can't, what can I do about this?" And his answer, to this day I remember, he said, "You and your ex-wife made this very complicated karma because of your emotional relationship and your sexual relationship. So now all of this anger is in place as a fruit of that confusion, misunderstanding. So to take away that anger, you must bow. So if you bow, that will take away your I, my, me, then this anger will come down." This is the way he would speak. And I thought, you asked him. so then I said, "How much, sir?" He said, 500 bows a day for 100 days. And then I went, "You asked him." So, okay. So this is the beginning of a 3-day retreat. So the next day, I did 500 bows. I couldn't do it all at once. So I did like 100. I was used to doing like 50 or 100. So I did 100, and then 2 or 3 hours later, I did another 100. And 2 hours later, I did another 100. It was a retreat, so I could do that. So that was Thursday. Then Friday, that was Friday. So Saturday morning, I couldn't hardly walk. And I had an interview with Zen Master Sung Song in the morning. So I went in and I said, "Sir, I can hardly walk. This is crazy." And I was 33 at the time, 34. And he laughed at me. He said, "You're a young man. I'm 62. I do 3,000 bows a day." And I went, yeah, okay. He said, "Just gradually work up." He just said, "Take it slow." So the next day I really couldn't bow. That was Sunday. But then Monday I spread it out and I did them all. And then the following Tuesday. So I was like on day 4 and of 100 days. And I just quit my aerobics class and I quit going to the gym. And I went, okay, this is just going to be your physical activity. And it took about a week to get in shape, as it were, to do this bowing. And then all of this anger appeared and I didn't want to do it. So I stopped for 2 or 3 days. And then I went, well, you should just do this. He told you to do it. You're putting your faith in him. You're going to try it. You really want this anger to go away. This is the map, so walk the walk. So I went back to it and I kept a calendar. So it took me about 125 days to do a 100-day practice. That's 25 days of screwing around. And, people would come to visit, and I was very self-conscious, and we'd go on a trip, and I'm not going to go to my parents' house and bow in the bedroom 500 times. I was too self-conscious, so there were just interruptions. So at the time, I'm living in California, my ex-wife is living in Virginia, and my children are in Virginia, and I would talk with the kids about once a month, and I'd see them about twice a year or once a year for 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And I finished the practice, and I was working in the studio as a painter, and all of these new paintings began to appear that I had never felt safe enough to do. And a lot of fear had dropped in the studio work. And when I had the kids on the phone, they seemed so relaxed and forthright in a way that they hadn't been before, it seemed to me. And when I talked to Sharon on the phone, it was all kind of normal. There was still a residue, but it wasn't running the show. And I was dumbstruck because from the age of roughly 25 to 33, I had been navigating this incomprehensible anger that was ruining my family unit. And then I had just done this thing that had nothing to do with it, and the whole landscape had changed. And the painting, my creative activity got much stronger, and the kids just relaxed. And Sungtang had said, if you do this bowing practice, then your wife will bow to you, your ex-wife will bow to you. Well, that just sounded like communism to me. I just thought, that's crazy speech. What's he talking about? What changed? What changed? I changed. I don't think Sharon changed significantly, but I changed in my capacity to hear who she was, understand her point of view, really. And I was no longer. So that, for me, was a real liberation from something that had imprisoned me in a horrible and life-diminishing way. And so that was a turning point. I was willing to give this tradition a little more trust, because I'm a very distrustful person by nature. I was able to trust it a little more, I should say by temperament. And give it a chance to work. Yeah.
So say again what the bowing means. Putting your head down is
When we
like-
touch our forehead to the ground, it's putting down our small I, my, me. That's the shortest way of saying it. So
the
that's,
self.
yeah, my opinion, my condition, and my situation. The easiest way to know when this is inflamed is when you're feeling, why me? Whenever you have that feeling, why is this happening to me? That's a small I, my, me. If you're able to just change that question to, what is happening to me? You will find a much more interesting landscape. Because what is happening to me is an incredibly valuable question, which will move the ball forward. It will move everything forward. But if you're asking, why is this happening to me? There's no answer, actually. Or there's 50,000 answers.
And then the hands are.
Yeah, then the lifting the hand is offering my true nature, which is I don't understand and is incomprehensible to me. But whatever it is, I'm going to offer it in service. Because the nature of our true nature is we're all one. And it's all going to improve together. That I am nothing in particular. I'm not anything in particular. It's not fixed. No one is. It's a flow. There's this constant flow or stream. And it's a willingness to just go with the flow. I mean, to use that cliche. We keep it incomprehensible. If I start to narrow down what that means in language, it's going to limit your capacity. Because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There's 14 people listening in here. That's 14 different ways of service, of offering your true nature up. You discover that. The teacher doesn't spell it out, or if the teacher does, it's going to be limited, or I'm making a mistake.
So I may be asking you to do this, but
But go
we'll
ahead,
give it
go
a
ahead.
shot.
I'll make the
So-
mistake with you and we'll benefit.
So you were talking about your creative acts, your creative.
Yeah.
How does that relate to like we would call it the no self, or maybe you would call it the no I,
Not self.
me?
Yeah, no, I, my, me.
Yeah.
That's a great question. It cuts right to the core of Buddhist teaching. When we are being creative, that's coming out of our conditioned self. Our conditioned self is the opposite self. Man, woman, rich, poor, happy, unhappy, healthy, not healthy, visionary, not a visionary, all of that. That's all opposites mind. All of us, all of our minds in here are different. That's our after-thinking mind. Our before-thinking mind is universal substance. That's the absolute. It cannot be obscured. And in every moment, these two are completely interpenetrating. And if we're clear, we see the truth we're in, our relationship to it, and then our function is possible. So in the case of an artistic activity, just for lack of a better example, when the artist is in the studio, their function is to paint the painting. Then if they paint 5 paintings and they're not making a living, and they're hungry and they're being evicted from the studio, then they have to navigate their correct function to take care of themselves, express their work, and live in the society at large. Make that relationship correct. And that is unique. Each event, it's even unique in one particular artist's life. It might be a certain way between the ages of 10 and 20, and another way between the ages of 20 and 30, etc., etc. You see? So when the artist is saying, I'm expressing myself, they can trust that great art is going to be a synthesis of the universal and the particular. Now, for me, the example of that, I just want to give this a little more because it's kind of my ground. You know, it's where I come from. Picasso painted Guernica. That painting is incredibly moving for me. That's because he tapped into universal issues in a particular way, entirely particular to him. But vast numbers of people see this painting and are overwhelmed with the horrors of war and the destruction of these innocent women and children. And you cannot lose touch with that if you're within 20 feet of this painting. In my opinion, you just cannot not see the devastation and ruin of this activity of war. Even if you're a hawk. Even a hawk, you know, even a politician who campaigns for war is going to go, yeah, it's hell. Let's make some more. But they're going to notice that it's hell if they see this painting, in my view. So he taps into the absolute, but it's in the particular. And we don't know, the artist doesn't know, and the audience doesn't know if this has been achieved until 500 years have gone by, really. Until human beings who don't share that landscape see these pieces and resonate the same way, then that's an indicator that something happened when that artist was doing the work. In addition, those artists can be assholes. They can. And it's a shame. But if their karma is controlling them, and in the studios, they might become very insightful and be able to tap into this absolute and communicate something at a very high price, maybe. Who knows? It's anything goes. But it doesn't guarantee that they don't treat their loved ones well, they don't treat themselves well, and that they don't understand humanity in a normal day-to-day way. That may not be present. We don't know. There's no guarantee. I don't share the view that the artist must suffer to create the great work. I don't think those two are necessarily causal. I think some brilliant work is done without any suffering whatsoever. But I do think brilliant work does need to tap into the absolute somehow. And I don't know what that is. And that's really left for the community of people to assess. I'm not sure the artist can assess it. I think there are many cases where they can't. But did that answer the question?
Lovely answer.
Oh, okay, okay. It's 4:30. So, well, I shouldn't be too abrupt. Did anyone else have something? Sorry. Things change.
We're not that formal.
No, we're not.
Oh, okay.
We could go on as long as you want.
We're not that good with time either.
Oh, yeah. Is there another question or a point or editorial? Okay. Well, I want to thank you before you make your point. What you people have done this afternoon are the two most valuable things. You have sat in complete silence, which is becoming Buddha. But whether you see it that way or not, you are becoming a Buddha as soon as you become still. That's manifesting your true nature. And then you have given me your attention for 45 minutes or an hour. Your attention is also the most valuable thing that you have. It's the thing your families require of you. It's the thing your employers require of you. And it's the thing you require of you to wake up. So thank you for your attention, and thank you for your true nature.